few days ago, Benjamin Netanyahu made a rather extraordinary discovery. Britain, apparently, is becoming an Islamic republic. An Islamic republic. Britain. The caliphate hasn't been established in Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim-majority country, not in Pakistan, not in Egypt, but apparently it has arrived in Britain. Netanyahu is hardly alone. Across the Atlantic, another supposed Islamic advance was detected this week. This time, the evidence is even more alarming. A woman in hijab. The woman appeared in an ordinary New York City video promoting summer activities for children. She was a mother, she smiled, she spoke about taking her children to museums and libraries. This was apparently enough. Right-wing activists seized on the video asking how a woman in hijab could represent an ordinary parent in New York and declaring that the Islamic takeover of America continues. An Islamic takeover because a Muslim mother appeared in a video. Consider how extraordinary that is. A piece of cloth covering a woman's hair becomes evidence of civilisational conquest. A Muslim woman simply appearing in public becomes a political event. And suddenly New York is apparently going the way of Netanyahu's Britain. Different countries, different incidents, the same extraordinary reflex. Muslim visibility is transformed into Muslim takeover. This selectivity is telling. Britain recently had a practicing Hindu Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Nobody warned of the Hinduization of Britain. Nobody announced that Westminster was becoming a Hindu republic. Then came Keir Starmer, whose wife is Jewish and whose children were raised within Jewish traditions. Still no talk of the Judaization of Britain. Britain is now led by Andy Burnham, a Catholic. And strangely enough, Netanyahu has yet to warn us about the terrifying Catholicization of Britain, but introduce Muslims into precisely the same plural society, and suddenly the vocabulary changes. It's no longer diversity, it is Islamization. It's no longer participation, it is infiltration. It's no longer democracy, it's takeover and conspiracy. A hijab is no longer something a woman wears, it becomes a flag planted on conquered territory. A Muslim mayor is no longer simply an elected politician, he becomes evidence that a city has been captured. Muslims voting are no longer citizens exercising democratic rights. They become a sinister bloc. Apparently, religious pluralism remains religious pluralism until the religion happens to be Islam. Of course, the idea itself is absurd. Muslims make up roughly 6% of Britain's population. And like every other community, they're not some monolithic bloc. They are ethnically, culturally, socially, and politically diverse. Muslims are not metaphysical creatures. They're human beings. They disagree with each other. They vote differently. They live differently. They think differently. And they occupy every imaginable corner of British and Western life. They're doctors and nurses, teachers and bus drivers, engineers, lawyers, shopkeepers, academics, councillors, members of parliament. Their children and grandchildren speak English, French, German or Dutch as their first language, and they know London, Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam or New York not as some temporary host country, but as home. Nor are Muslims some alien population that suddenly washed up on Europe's shores yesterday. Europe and the Muslim world have been entangled for more than 1,000 years through war and trade, scholarship and diplomacy, migration and empire, conflict and cultural exchange. And modern Muslim communities in Europe are inseparable from Europe's own imperial and post-war history. After the Second World War, countries such as Britain and France recruited workers from colonies and former colonies to help rebuild their economies. They worked in factories, on transport systems, in hospitals, across public services. They settled. Their children were born here, then their grandchildren. And somewhere along the way, something happened that some people still find rather difficult to swallow. The migrant became the citizen. Yet much of the rhetoric surrounding Muslims remains trapped in the language of arrival, as though millions of people who have lived here for generations have only just stepped off a boat, as though they remain temporary visitors who can at any moment simply be told to go back. Go back. Go back where? Where exactly is a second, third, fourth generation Londoner or Parisian supposed to return to? Where is a Muslim born in New York supposed to go back to? They are home. And that is precisely what the politics of permanent foreigners cannot accept, because modern Britain or France or America is not a museum exhibit. It's not a cultural artifact preserved under glass, authentic only so long as nobody touches it. Societies change because the people who inhabit them change them. Migrants absorb the language, institutions, habits and culture of the societies in which they live, and those societies absorb something from them in return. Food changes, thankfully. Music changes, language changes, cities change, politics changes. This is not Islamizations, this is society. This is what societies do. They evolve. They give and they take. But there's a powerful politics devoted to turning this ordinary process into something frightening, and the Muslim has become something very useful to it. Across Europe and America, sections of the populist and far right are increasingly finding common cause with Israel's hard right around the shared politics of Muslim threat. Netanyahu's language belongs squarely within this politics. One of his own ministers, Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Shikli, recently observed that Western audiences may not be terribly interested in anti-Semitism, but that radical Islam interests them very, very much. That phrase, radical Islam, performs a useful sleight of hand, because in this rhetoric, the boundaries between radical Islam, Islam itself, and ordinary Muslims are constantly blurred. The extremist becomes indistinguishable from the Muslim and from Islam, and Islam becomes a civilization supposedly advancing upon the West. Shikli's conclusion was remarkably candid. Therefore, he says, we need to take advantage of that. Take advantage of it. That is the strategy stated in plain language. Take Western anxiety about Muslims, amplify it, turn Muslims into a common threat, and build political alliances around that fear. For Netanyahu, that alliance is particularly useful now, because as outrage grows across Western societies over Israel's treatment of Palestinians, there is a very convenient way to avoid confronting that criticism on its merits, discredit the society producing it. So Britain, France, or Spain are not turning against Israeli policy because millions of their citizens are horrified by what they're seeing. No, they're being Islamized. Opposition to Israeli crimes becomes evidence of Islamist influence. Muslim political participation becomes infiltration. A country changing its political position becomes evidence that Muslims have somehow captured the country. And here's the trick. Muslims are told to integrate, so they integrate. They're told to participate, so they participate. They're told to vote, so they vote. They're told to enter institutions, contribute to society, and become active good citizens, so they do. And then their integration itself becomes evidence of infiltration. They may belong, just not visibly. They may participate, just not enough to matter. They may have a voice, just not loud enough to be heard. But that is not integration, and it's certainly not citizenship. Citizenship means belonging to a country strongly enough to help shape it. Perhaps the real question was never whether Muslims could integrate into Western societies. Millions plainly have. The more revealing question is whether everyone else is prepared to accept what integration actually looks like. Because integration doesn't mean invisibility. It doesn't mean disappearing into the background so completely that nobody has to notice you're Muslim. Sometimes it looks like a hijabi mum taking her kids to a museum in London or New York.